Is SEO dead? This is something I wanted to share my insight on, having been in the SEO world now for almost 15 years, going back to 2008 when I started an e-commerce business. I think this question is rather complex, so I'm going to try my best to kind of break it down and explain it here and give some direction on how SEO should be approached going forward. Now, there's no shortage of people out there asking, is SEO dead? You can see a quick Google here reveals tons of content out there on the topic. And if you're a Reddit user and you lurk on Reddit, you probably know that this post gets made nearly weekly. And it probably gets made nearly daily, but the Reddit moderators just block them all out, right? Is SEO dead? So I found this piece right here just recently, a few days ago. I'm recording this on August 9th, 2022, back on August 4th, 2022. So 5 days ago, this piece was published. I might skim through it and pull some details out, but I'm going to kind of go with the flow from my own insight and experience. Going back to 2008, I started an e-commerce business in 2008. I ultimately sold that in 2012. Then I got into the offline business world, started a home service business in 2012, grew that, bought and invested in others, and along the way, I've also bought and invested in online businesses. So my whole career, going back to 2008, I was 18 when I started that online business, the e-commerce business, has been in the online world, and SEO is a big, big part of online business. And I say my whole career has been in the online world. Mind you, there was a big time and a big chunk of the cash flow in my life has been generated from offline businesses. But mind you, the revenue has largely been driven through online streams or online sources. So anyways, yeah, it's a whole lot of words to say. The bread and butter of my life has been earned through online marketing, and a substantial portion of that is SEO, search engine optimization. So where does that leave us here in 2022? Is it dead? That's the big question. All right. First thing we need to think about is user behavior. How many people use search engines? Now, the details here in this post said today 53% of all traffic comes from organic search. In fact, the first search result in Google averages 26.9% of click-throughs on mobile and 32% on desktop. So we're going to come back to those statistics. But the big thing here is how many people are using Google, and that you really can't tell from this, or you can't tell if it's in a positive uptrend or downtrend from this data. Yes, 53% of all web traffic comes from organic search, but we really need to understand what percentage came from organic search before. And I don't have the hard numbers on it, but based on my own experience and analytics from my own websites and from content websites that I've been involved with, that number is declining, right? Years ago, I would say 10 years ago, the number was likely much higher, maybe like 80% of all website traffic came from organic search. And what I see is a trend of people using the internet and not using organic search or searching for businesses to find businesses, right? When we're saying organic search, we're largely talking about Google. So for example, my girlfriend spends the whole day online, but she never opens up a Google search browser. She just browses her apps, and whatever is there is what's there, right? Like that is, I don't want to say that's her search engine, but that's her gateway to the online world. She could go the whole day and never use a Google search. 10 years ago, you basically had to use Google search for everything. So what I'm noticing here, what I've noticed and experienced is there's a decline in people using search to actually find and interact with businesses online. Now, let's just go to these next two statistics here, which are really out of context in and of themselves, right? 26.9% on mobile, the first search result. Well, what this tells me, and in my experience, is to really get any traffic from Google, you have to be that first organic search results. There's a very, very steep drop-off here between the first search result on a page and the last one. Right? I mean, the last one gets basically none, make it like 1%. If you're on page 2, you basically get 0%. So to actually get search volume from Google, you have to be in the top 1 position. Not top 1, but like top 3. Below top 3, you really get an immaterial amount of search unless it's just for an absolutely high volume of search traffic. Okay? We'll come back to the top 3 here. I'm going to skip over this. Here, this author just kind of gives an overview of the algorithm updates and then machine learning. We're going to come back to that, but I want to come down to this part here. He uses the expression, "Honey, I shrunk the organic search space." I like that expression, because at the same time that there's a trend of users not using search to find businesses and information online, there is also a trend of Google stuffing more and more paid placement into the top of their search results. And subsequently, while they're sticking it in there, they are optimizing it to get users to click on it. So they're essentially driving users, and they've done a very good job at this, into their paid content. Right, and that's subsequently driving the organic visitors down. Right, for a search for, say, roofing, for example, you're going to have your pay-per-click up at the top. You're going to have your local service ads, and then you're also going to have your map, which is probably in roofing going to be dominated by paid placement. Right, so the user on a mobile will have to scroll like 3 or 4 times before they get to the organic content, and at the same time, the content up top, the paid content, looks a lot more clickable and attractive and engaging than the actual organic results. And then there's things like the featured snippets in the news stories, which Google is displaying the content, taking the snippet content particularly from websites and displaying it in Google search. And they're trying to harness the user and keep them in the Google as opposed to sending them onto your website. Right? So let's kind of go back and summarize these 2 factors. We've got a declining trend in people using search, and then we've got a growing trend in Google driving users to paid placement, and a growing trend in Google keeping the user on their browser, or in their, not their browser, but in their kind of website or search platform. So when you consider those, I would say that the value of search is absolutely declining. I mean, there's no way of saying it, and there's no questioning it in my experience. 10 years ago, I would print money with organic traffic. These days, it's a nice source to have, but it is not a money printer by any stretch of the imagination, right? Now let's kind of talk about the actual content optimization. Well, if we come back here, this author kind of summarized machine learning and the updates, right? And ultimately, Google has gotten very, very good at detecting what your content is about and displaying the best content to the users. So it used to be that you could do some manipulative things and kind of get away with it in Google and get to the top. These days, you can't, right? Like Google doesn't even need keywords anymore. I always find that funny when people are talking about, keywords on a page and meta titles and meta descriptions, in things like that. If you think that those are the primary factor in the Google algorithm, you are just, you're behind, like you're on the caboose of the train and hanging off. Google hasn't been about that in years. Google's looking at signals that are far deeper than what the average user can comprehend. I mean, you got to think about it. Google has access to the smartest minds on the planet when it comes to developing algorithms. They've got the deepest pockets to, create them. They're certainly looking at things that the average layperson like you and I cannot come up with, cannot conceive, but cannot really comprehend. They're looking at signals beyond that. Okay, so let me just check my notes. I made a little notepad here, right? Google's looking at things. All right, so what should we do going forward? Well, first of all, I'm going to say this, if I haven't made this already clear, don't bank on SEO. Right, I see a lot of businesses and a lot of local business owners, especially because I'm in the offline home service business world. I own and invest in offline home service businesses, more specifically HVAC, plumbing, concrete coating, and I did own a pretty big exterior contracting business for a while. But I see a lot of people in those spaces that really just chase SEO like it's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And well, I guess it kind of is, because you're never going to fucking get it. All right. The Google algorithm is way deeper than that. So what I'm saying here is don't do things for the sake of doing it for SEO. Instead, publish content. And publishing content to satisfy things that have search volume, keywords, publishing content to satisfy that search intent, works, right? So let's just say that somebody is asking, I don't know, what is the difference between general liability insurance and professional errors and omissions insurance? Okay, well, publishing content, whether that's writing a blog post, doing a podcast, or doing a video, or probably a combination of all of them and published all on one page to satisfy that search intent and doing a damn good job of it is how you capture the search intent for that topic. You don't need to stuff the keyword all over the page. You really just literally need to do a good job, an expert job at satisfying the search intent for a real human. So I guess what I'm saying is keyword research and understanding what people are searching for is rather important. Searching, you're not going to get any value from publishing, you're not going to get any value from publishing content on topics that people are not searching for. At least you're not going to get any value of that in terms of SEO. That piece of content might be good for using for email marketing or using in the sales nurturing process or something to that effect. I'm getting text messages here. Might as well just quit my app. Okay, so we got published content that satisfies search intent. The next thing, build your brand. One thing that I feel has a very powerful impact on search traffic, and something that I've found backed up with, data from websites that get a lot of traffic, is websites that have a brand get more traffic. And this, this seems really intuitive because think about it. Google wants to reward the businesses that are out there building a brand in the real world and not just relying on Google themselves. So, if you notice, the biggest brands that you probably interact with are ones that get a ton of search traffic, or subsequently they get a lot of search traffic. And this is something that would be very difficult for anyone to manipulate. The people that actually type in, looking for this brand. That's something that couldn't be manipulated very easily. Google would be able to detect people that are trying to manipulate that pretty easily. So because it's hard to manipulate, and it indicates the value of a brand and subsequently the information that they're going to be putting out, I think Google would get more search volume to them. And I notice that a lot in local businesses and both online businesses. The ones that are at the top of the search results, and oftentimes the businesses that you see at the top results that are kind of inexplicably there. There's always those businesses in the search results, and you're like, why is this business here? Well, usually they're businesses that have been around a long time and they've built up one hell of an offline brand. And finally, build a business that is sustainable with paid customer acquisition or paid advertisements. Because ultimately, Google and any other platform out there that has been free is moving towards and trying to drive all their users into a paid model and ultimately monetize it. And they're very successful at it. We've seen this, not just with Google, but with other social media platforms like Facebook. 10 years ago, you could get a big organic reach on there as a business. Now, as a business on Facebook, you get basically no organic reach. You got to pay for it. So I think all businesses should adapt their model to be profitable with paid customer acquisition costs. In fact, I would not be involved in a business that cannot afford to pay to acquire customers. And then with that, you diversify your customer acquisition sources. So you're not just entirely dependent on Google. I think that about sums up what I've got here on this topic. One other thing I want to say here, and I know this will come up and, maybe this could be summarized or inferred from what I said, so I'll just clarify it. But personally, I don't believe that businesses should be spending any money on, quote, SEO. If you want to capture organic search traffic, go back to the first thing I said, which is publishing content on topics that people are searching for, satisfying that search intent. If you're paying someone or paying a service to create that content for you, that's good. And ultimately, the kind of auxiliary benefit of that is getting search traffic. But by and large, anything out there that's just labeled an SEO service is smoke and mirrors at this point. So guys, I hope you found that one helpful and insightful. If you did, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. I'm signing off on this one.